Elena stood at the window of their small apartment, watching the rain streak down the glass like tears. Behind her, Marcus packed his belongings into a worn leather suitcase, the same one his grandfather had carried during his own travels decades ago. The silence between them wasn't angry or bitter. It was the kind of quiet that comes when two people love each other so deeply that words feel inadequate. They had known this day would come for months. Marcus had been offered the research position in Antarctica, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study climate change at the most remote weather station on Earth. The contract was for 3 years, with limited communication and no visits home. Elena, a pediatric nurse at the local children's hospital, couldn't leave her patients or her elderly mother who lived just blocks away. "Do you remember our first date?" Elena asked softly, not turning from the window. Marcus paused in his packing, a small smile crossing his face despite the heaviness in his heart. "The botanical gardens. You wore that yellow dress with tiny flowers on it." He walked over and stood beside her at the window. "You were so excited about the butterfly exhibit that you forgot to be nervous." Elena finally turned to look at him, her eyes glistening. "You remembered every single butterfly species we saw. I thought you were showing off." "I was," Marcus admitted with a gentle laugh. "I wanted to impress you so badly. I'd spent the entire week before studying butterfly guides." They had met 2 years ago at a coffee shop near the hospital where Elena worked. Marcus had been a regular customer, always ordering the same thing, black coffee and a blueberry muffin, while grading papers from his environmental science classes at the local university. Elena would stop by during her breaks, usually exhausted from long shifts, but always managing to brighten when she saw him reading in the corner booth. Their courtship had been slow and sweet. Marcus would leave little notes and books for Elena to find when she browsed the bookstore next to the coffee shop. Elena would bring him homemade soup when he worked late in his lab. They shared quiet Sunday mornings reading newspapers in bed, and long walks through the city parks where Marcus would point out different plants and birds while Elena told him stories about her young patients. Now, as the rain continued to fall outside their window, they both knew they were facing the hardest decision of their lives. Love wasn't always enough to overcome circumstances, but it was enough to make letting go feel impossible. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple silver ring with a small diamond that caught the gray light from the window. "I bought this 6 months ago," he said quietly. "I was going to propose on your birthday next month. I thought maybe if we were engaged, it would make the waiting easier. Give us something to look forward to when I come back." Elena stared at the ring, then at Marcus's face. She could see the hope and fear warring in his expression. She loved him. She had never loved anyone the way she loved Marcus. But she also knew that 3 years was a long time. People changed. Circumstances changed. And she couldn't bear the thought of making promises they might not be able to keep. "Marcus," she whispered, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I love you more than I ever thought possible. But I can't. We can't build our future on the hope that everything will be the same when you return." His face fell, but he nodded slowly. He had known what her answer would be even before he asked. It was one of the things he loved about Elena, her honesty, even when it hurt. "I know," he said, closing the box and putting it back in his pocket. "I just needed to try." They spent their last evening together cooking dinner in their tiny kitchen, sharing stories and memories as if they could somehow store them up against the loneliness to come. Elena made Marcus's favorite pasta dish while he prepared the salad, and they opened a bottle of wine they had been saving for a special occasion. As the night grew late, they sat on their small couch, Elena curled against Marcus's side as they watched an old movie neither of them was really paying attention to. They talked about small things, whether Elena should repaint the bedroom, what Marcus might find in Antarctica, how Elena's mother was recovering from her recent surgery. When it was time for bed, they held each other close, memorizing the feeling of being together. Neither of them slept much, but they pretended to, not wanting to waste their last hours together talking about how much it hurt. In the early morning, Marcus's taxi arrived to take him to the airport. Elena helped him carry his bags downstairs, and they stood on the sidewalk as the sun began to rise over their neighborhood. The driver waited patiently in the car, understanding without being told that this was a goodbye that couldn't be rushed. "Write to me," Elena said, though they both knew that letters to Antarctica were few and far between. "Every chance I get," Marcus promised. "And, Elena, if you meet someone." She shook her head quickly. "Don't. Let's not talk about that now." Marcus nodded and pulled her into one final embrace. They kissed goodbye softly, neither wanting to let go, both knowing they had to. When they finally separated, Elena stepped back and wrapped her arms around herself, watching as Marcus got into the taxi. As the car pulled away from the curb, Marcus looked back through the rear window to see Elena still standing on the sidewalk, her hand raised in a small wave. She stayed there until the taxi turned the corner and disappeared from sight, and only then did she allow herself to cry. 3 months had passed since Marcus left for Antarctica, and Elena had settled into a routine that helped her cope with his absence. She threw herself into her work at the Children's Hospital, volunteering for extra shifts and taking on additional responsibilities. Her colleagues noticed her dedication, but also saw the sadness she carried with her like a shadow. The first letter from Marcus arrived on a Tuesday in November. Elena found it waiting in her mailbox when she came home from a particularly difficult day at the hospital. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope, seeing his familiar handwriting for the first time since he left. "My dearest Elena," the letter began. "I'm writing this by candlelight in my small research station, listening to the wind howl across the ice. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. But, mostly, it's lonely without you." Marcus wrote about his work, the other researchers at the station, and the incredible landscapes he encountered daily. He described the aurora australis dancing across the night sky and the strange silence that came when the wind finally stopped blowing. But between every observation and detail, Elena could read his longing for home, for her. She wrote back immediately, telling him about her patients, her mother's gradual recovery, and the small changes in their neighborhood. She mentioned that Mrs. Rodriguez next door had asked about him, and that the coffee shop where they first met had started serving a new blend that she thought he would like. What she didn't tell him was how difficult the adjustment had been, how she sometimes reached for his hand while walking down the street, or how she still made enough coffee for 2 people every morning out of habit. She didn't mention the job offer she had received from a children's hospital in Seattle, or how seriously she was considering taking it. As winters settled over the city, Elena found herself spending more time with her friend Sarah, a fellow nurse who had recently gone through her own difficult breakup. They would meet for dinner after their shifts, and Sarah would listen patiently as Elena talked about Marcus and tried to work through her feelings. "Do you regret not getting engaged?" Sarah asked one evening as they sat in a small restaurant near the hospital. Elena considered the question carefully. "I don't regret the decision," she said finally. "But I regret that we had to make it at all. I regret that love isn't enough sometimes." "Love is enough," Sarah said gently. "But timing matters too. And circumstances. That doesn't make what you had with Marcus any less real or important." Around this time, Elena began taking art classes at the community center, something she had always wanted to try but never had time for when she and Marcus were together. She discovered she had a talent for watercolor painting, and she found that the quiet focus required helped calm her mind in the evenings when the apartment felt too empty. Her paintings were mostly landscapes, mountains, forests, seascapes, but sometimes she would find herself painting scenes from memory. The botanical gardens where she and Marcus had their first date. The small cafe where they spent countless mornings. The view from their apartment window on rainy days. One evening in December, Elena was painting at her kitchen table when she received an unexpected visitor. Marcus's sister, Jennifer, knocked on her door, carrying a small package and wearing a nervous expression. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," Jennifer said. "Marcus asked me to check on you, and I had something he wanted me to give you." Elena invited Jennifer in for tea, and they sat in the living room where Elena and Marcus had spent so many quiet evenings together. Jennifer was a few years older than Marcus, married with 2 young children, and had always been kind to Elena during their relationship. "He's worried about you," Jennifer said gently. "He writes to me about the research, but mostly he writes about missing you. I think he's having a harder time than he expected." Elena nodded, feeling a familiar ache in her chest. "I miss him too. Every day." Jennifer handed Elena the package. "He sent this for you. He said it was something he wanted you to have, whether he comes back or not." Inside the package, Elena found a small wooden box that Marcus had carved himself. She recognized his handiwork from the little bird sculptures he used to make in his spare time. Inside the box was a collection of dried flowers, roses, daisies, and baby's breath from the bouquets he had given her during their relationship. He had pressed and preserved them, and with them was a note. "So you can remember that some beautiful things last, even when circumstances change." Elena held the wooden box in her hands and felt tears streaming down her face. It was such a thoughtful, beautiful gift, but it also felt like a goodbye. Like Marcus was trying to give her permission to move forward without him. He really loves you, Jennifer said softly, watching Elena's reaction. I know, Elena whispered. That's what makes this so hard. After Jennifer left, Elena sat alone in her living room, holding the box of preserved flowers and thinking about the choices they had made. She thought about the job offer in Seattle, which she hadn't mentioned to anyone, not even Sarah. It was a good opportunity, better pay, more responsibility, a chance to start fresh in a new city where everything wouldn't remind her of Marcus. That night, Elena wrote her longest letter yet to Marcus. She told him about Jennifer's visit, about how touched she was by his gift, and about how proud she was of the important work he was doing in Antarctica. She also told him about her art classes and included a small watercolor sketch of their apartment window. What she didn't tell him, what she was still working up the courage to say, was that she had decided to take the job in Seattle. She would be leaving after the new year, starting a new chapter in a place where she could heal and grow without constantly being reminded of what she had lost. As she sealed the letter, Elena realized that Marcus had been right to give her the pressed flowers. Some beautiful things did last, even when circumstances changed. Their love would always be a part of her, something she could carry forward into whatever came next. But holding on to that love didn't mean she had to stop living her own life. January arrived with an unexpected warmth, as if the city itself was encouraging new beginnings. Elena had made her decision about Seattle and had given her notice at the Children's Hospital. Her last day would be February 15th, giving her time to help train her replacement and say proper goodbyes to her young patients and their families. She had not yet told Marcus about her decision. Each time she sat down to write the letter, she found herself unable to put the words on paper. How do you tell someone you love that you're moving across the country? How do you explain that staying feels like living in a museum of memories? Her mother, Rosa, had taken the news better than Elena expected. They sat together in Rosa's small kitchen, drinking coffee and sharing the almond cookies that had been Elena's favorite since childhood. Mija, you need to live your life, Rosa said, patting Elena's hand with her weathered fingers. Your Marcus, he would want this for you. He would want you to be happy, to find new adventures. But what if he comes back and I'm not here? Elena asked, voicing the fear that kept her awake at night. Rosa smiled sadly. Then, maybe it wasn't meant to be. But hiding from life won't change that. You can love someone and still choose yourself. Elena's colleagues at the hospital threw her a farewell party on a snowy Thursday evening. Dr. Peterson, the head of pediatrics, made a speech about Elena's dedication and compassion. Sarah presented her with a photo album filled with pictures from their friendship and notes from the children she had cared for over the years. You're going to do amazing things in Seattle, Sarah said as they hugged goodbye at the end of the evening. And who knows, maybe this is exactly what you need to figure out what comes next. As Elena packed her belongings over the following weeks, she found herself reliving her relationship with Marcus through the objects they had shared. The books they had read together, the coffee mugs from their favorite shops, the small succulent plant Marcus had given her for their 6-month anniversary. Each item required a decision: pack it, donate it, or leave it behind. She decided to keep the wooden box of pressed flowers, along with a few photos and the sweater Marcus had left in her closet. Everything else, she realized, were just things. The real memories lived in her heart and couldn't be packed in boxes. On February 10th, 5 days before her departure, Elena received a phone call that changed everything. She was at her mother's house, helping Rosa organize her medications, when the phone rang. Rosa answered it and then handed it to Elena with a confused expression. It's for you, Mija. Someone calling about Marcus. Elena's heart stopped as she took the phone. On the other end was Dr. Catherine Webb, the research coordinator for Marcus's Antarctic expedition. Miss Elena Santos? Dr. Webb's voice was professional, but kind. I'm calling about Marcus Rivera. There's been an incident. The world seemed to tilt around Elena as Dr. Webb explained that Marcus had been in an accident during a research expedition. A sudden storm had separated him from his team for 36 hours. He had been found unconscious with hypothermia and a head injury, and had been evacuated to a hospital in Chile. He's stable now, Dr. Webb assured her. But he's been asking for you. He gave us your number as his emergency contact. I wanted to let you know that we're arranging for him to be transported back to the United States for further treatment. Elena sank into Rosa's kitchen chair, her mind racing. Will he be okay? The doctors are optimistic. He'll need time to recover, and there may be some lasting effects from the head injury, but they expect him to make a full recovery. He should be back in the country by tomorrow evening. After Dr. Webb hung up, Elena sat in Rosa's kitchen, staring at the phone in her hands. Her mother sat beside her, waiting patiently for an explanation. Marcus was hurt, Elena said quietly. He's coming home. Rosa nodded slowly. And you leave for Seattle in 5 days. Yes. What will you do, Mija? Elena didn't know. Everything she had carefully planned and decided was suddenly uncertain again. She had been preparing to start a new life without Marcus, and now he was coming home, hurt and needing care. But she also couldn't forget why they had said goodbye in the first place. His accident didn't change the fundamental challenges they had faced. That evening, Elena called Dr. Webb back to get more details about which hospital Marcus would be taken to when he arrived. She learned that he would be at Metropolitan General, just 20 minutes from her apartment. Without fully deciding what it meant, Elena knew she had to see him. She arrived at the hospital the next evening, just as Marcus was being admitted. She stayed in the waiting area, not sure if she should make herself known or simply leave. Through the glass doors of the emergency department, she caught a glimpse of him being wheeled in on a stretcher, unconscious and pale, his usually thick hair partially shaved where they had treated his head injury. Dr. Patricia Morgan, the attending physician, came out to speak with the family members gathered in the waiting room. Jennifer and her husband, Marcus's parents who had driven in from their retirement home in Florida, and a few colleagues from the university. Elena hung back, uncertain of her place in this crisis. She was no longer Marcus's girlfriend, no longer his emergency contact. But when Jennifer spotted her, she immediately came over and pulled Elena into a hug. "Thank God you're here," Jennifer said. "He's been asking for you ever since he woke up in Chile." Dr. Morgan explained that Marcus had suffered a concussion and severe hypothermia, but that his vital signs were stable and improving. He would need several days in the hospital for observation, followed by weeks of rest and rehabilitation. "Can I see him?" Elena asked quietly. "Family only for now," Dr. Morgan said. "But he should be awake and able to have visitors tomorrow morning." Elena went home that night and sat in her empty apartment, surrounded by packed boxes and the remnants of her old life. She was supposed to be on a plane to Seattle in 4 days, starting fresh in a new city with new possibilities. But Marcus was lying in a hospital bed, having nearly died in the place that was supposed to represent his dreams and future. She thought about the last conversation they had shared before he left, about the ring he had offered, and her decision to say no. She thought about the job waiting for her in Seattle, and the new life she had been so carefully constructing. And she thought about love, how it persisted even when circumstances tried to tear it apart, how it showed up in hospital waiting rooms and middle-of-the-night phone calls. Elena didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat by her window, watching the city wake up in the early morning light, trying to decide what kind of person she wanted to be and what kind of life she wanted to build. Elena arrived at the hospital the next morning carrying a small bouquet of daisies from the flower shop near her apartment. She had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the ceiling and questioning every decision she had made over the past few months. The Seattle job offer felt like a distant dream now, overshadowed by the reality of Marcus lying in a hospital bed just 20 minutes away. When she reached his room, she paused outside the door, gathering her courage. Through the small window, she could see him sitting up in bed, talking quietly with Jennifer. His head was bandaged, and his face was thinner than she remembered, but his eyes were alert and focused. He looked like Marcus, but also like someone who had been through something profound and life-changing. Jennifer noticed Elena first and smiled, gesturing for her to come in. When Marcus turned toward the door and saw her, his face lit up with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. "Elena," he said softly, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube they had removed that morning. "Hi," she replied, suddenly, feeling awkward and unsure. She held up the flowers. "I brought these. Daisies. I remembered they were your favorite." Marcus smiled, and, for a moment, it was as if no time had passed at all. "They're beautiful. Thank you." Jennifer gathered her purse and jacket. "I'll give you two some time to talk," she said, squeezing Elena's shoulder as she passed. "I'll be in the cafeteria if you need anything." After Jennifer left, Elena and Marcus looked at each other in silence for a moment. There was so much to say, so much that had happened since they last saw each other, but neither knew where to begin. "I heard about your accident from Dr. Webb," Elena said finally, pulling a chair closer to his bed. "I was so scared when she called." "How are you feeling?" "Confused, mostly," Marcus admitted. "The doctors say I might have some memory issues for a while, but nothing permanent. I remember the storm, getting separated from my team, but everything after that is pretty fuzzy until I woke up in Chile. Elena nodded, studying his face. There was something different about him now, something quieter and more thoughtful than before. The accident had clearly affected him in ways that went beyond his physical injuries. Dr. Webb said you asked for me, Elena said gently. Marcus nodded slowly. When I woke up in that hospital in Chile, you were the first person I thought of. Not the research, not Antarctica, just you. I kept asking them to call you, but they said they needed to focus on getting me stable first. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm glad you're okay. When Dr. Webb called, I was afraid I might have lost you forever. You almost did, Marcus said quietly. Being out there in that storm, thinking I might die, all I could think about was how we left things. How I left without really fighting for us. Elena looked down at her hands, twisted in her lap. This conversation was heading toward territory she wasn't sure she was ready to navigate. Everything was happening so fast, and she hadn't had time to process her own feelings about seeing him again. Marcus, she began carefully, I need to tell you something. I got a job offer in Seattle. I was supposed to start next week. His face fell, but he nodded slowly. That's wonderful, Elena. Really, you deserve new opportunities. I said was supposed to, she clarified. I haven't decided what to do now. Marcus studied her face, and she could see him trying to read her emotions. Don't change your plans because of me, he said finally. I won't be the reason you give up on something good for yourself. But that's just it, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. I don't know if running away to Seattle is something good for myself, or just something safe. Something that lets me avoid dealing with how I really feel. Over the next few days, Elena visited Marcus every morning before work and every evening afterward. They talked about everything. His experience in Antarctica, her art classes, the changes in their old neighborhood, his slow recovery process. But they carefully avoided talking about the future, both sensing that any decisions needed to come from a place of healing rather than crisis. Dr. Morgan had told Marcus that his recovery would take several months. The head injury would require ongoing monitoring, and he would need physical therapy to regain his full strength. His research career would have to be put on hold, at least temporarily. I keep thinking about something that happened during the storm, Marcus told Elena one evening as they sat together in his hospital room. I was lost, couldn't see anything, couldn't feel my feet anymore. And I had this moment of clarity about what mattered most to me. It wasn't the research or proving myself or any of that. It was the idea of coming home to you. Elena felt her heart clench. Marcus, I'm not saying this to pressure you, he continued quickly. I know we both had good reasons for the decisions we made, but nearly dying changes your perspective on things. Makes you realize that some risks are worth taking. That night, Elena sat in her apartment, surrounded by boxes and the life she had been preparing to leave behind. She thought about the conversation with Marcus, about the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about nearly dying. She also thought about her mother's words about choosing herself and Sarah's advice about love and timing. The next morning, Elena made 2 phone calls. The first was to the hospital in Seattle, explaining that she needed to decline their job offer due to family circumstances. The second was to Dr. Peterson at her current hospital, asking if her position was still available. We held it open hoping you might change your mind, Dr. Peterson said warmly. The children have been asking about you. When can you start back? That evening, Elena arrived at Marcus's hospital room, carrying a small wrapped package. He was sitting by the window, looking much stronger than he had when she first saw him a week ago. I have something for you, she said, handing him the package. Inside was a small watercolor painting Elena had done from memory, the view from their apartment window on a rainy day, with 2 coffee cups sitting on the windowsill. Marcus stared at the painting for a long moment, his eyes growing misty. It's beautiful. You've gotten really good at this. I had a lot of quiet evenings to practice, Elena said with a small smile. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I turned down the Seattle job. His head snapped up, concern filling his expression. Elena, no? You can't make life decisions based on my accident. That's not fair to either of us. I'm not, she said firmly. I'm making this decision based on what I learned about myself while you were gone. I was running away, Marcus. From the pain of losing you, from the fear of taking risks, from the possibility that love might be messy and complicated and worth fighting for anyway. Marcus set the painting carefully on his bedside table and looked at her intently. What are you saying? Elena took a deep breath. I'm saying that I don't want to run away anymore. I don't know what our future looks like, and I can't promise it will be easy. But I want to try. If you're willing to build something new together, something that takes into account everything we've learned about ourselves and each other. Marcus reached for her hand, and Elena let him take it. His fingers were warm and familiar, but there was something different about his touch now, more intentional, more grateful. Are you sure? He asked softly. Because I can't go back to Antarctica, Elena. The doctors say I'm not cleared for extreme weather research anymore. I'll have to find a different path, figure out what comes next. Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. Then, we'll figure it out together. 6 months later, Elena and Marcus sat in the community garden they had helped establish behind the local elementary school. It was a warm Saturday morning in early fall, and children's laughter echoed around them as families tended to their small plots of vegetables and flowers. Marcus was teaching a group of 8-year-olds about soil composition, his enthusiasm for science as strong as ever, even though his career had taken a completely different direction. After leaving the hospital, Marcus had spent 2 months in rehabilitation, working to regain his physical strength and dealing with the occasional headaches that remained from his concussion. During that time, Elena had moved back into their old apartment, not because they were picking up exactly where they left off, but because they had decided to intentionally rebuild their relationship from a place of greater understanding. The process hadn't been easy. Both of them had changed during their time apart. Elena had become more independent and confident in her own decisions. Marcus had gained a deeper appreciation for the importance of community and connection over individual achievement. They had to learn how to be together again while honoring the growth they had each experienced separately. Dr. Morgan had been right about Marcus needing ongoing monitoring, but wrong about the severity of his limitations. While extreme weather research was no longer an option for him, Marcus had discovered a passion for environmental education. He now worked for the city's Parks and Recreation Department, developing science programs for children and leading community initiatives like the garden where they now sat. Mr. Rivera, look, called out a little girl named Sophia, holding up a tomato she had just picked. It's perfect, Marcus grinned and walked over to admire her harvest. Elena watched him interact with the children and felt a warmth spread through her chest. This version of Marcus, patient, nurturing, focused on teaching rather than discovering, was different from the driven researcher she had fallen in love with, but no less wonderful. Elena had also found new directions for her own life. She had kept her position at the children's hospital but had also begun teaching art therapy classes for young patients dealing with serious illnesses. The combination of her nursing background and artistic skills had created a unique opportunity to help children process their medical experiences through creative expression. They had gotten engaged 3 months ago, but not in the way Marcus had originally planned. There was no dramatic proposal or surprise ring. Instead, it had been a quiet conversation on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper together, when Elena had looked up and said, "I think I'm ready to plan a future with you now." Marcus had retrieved the ring from its hiding place in his sock drawer, and they had talked for hours about what marriage meant to them now. Not a promise that nothing would change, but a commitment to change and grow together, to face whatever challenges came their way as partners. Their wedding was planned for the following spring, a small ceremony in the botanical gardens where they had their first date. Elena's mother was helping with the planning, delighting in every detail from the flowers to the menu. Jennifer would be Elena's matron of honor, and Marcus's research colleague from his university days would serve as his best man. "How's the new mural coming along?" Marcus asked, sitting back down beside Elena on the bench they had donated to the garden in memory of his grandfather. Elena smiled, thinking about the large-scale painting she was working on in the children's wing of the hospital. Slowly but surely, the kids have so many ideas about what should be included. Yesterday, Tommy insisted we needed a purple elephant that could fly. And will there be a purple elephant that can fly? Marcus asked, grinning. Absolutely, Elena laughed. It's their mural. They should see their dreams reflected in it. As they sat together, watching the children explore the garden and their parents share gardening tips, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she had been packing boxes and preparing to start over in Seattle, convinced that love wasn't enough to overcome practical obstacles. Now, she understood that love alone wasn't enough, but love combined with commitment, communication, and a willingness to adapt and grow could overcome almost anything. Marcus's accident had been terrifying and traumatic, but it had also given them both clarity about their priorities. Elena no longer feared taking risks in her personal life, and Marcus had learned that meaningful work didn't have to involve exotic locations or groundbreaking discoveries. Sometimes the most important work happened in your own community, with the people who needed you most. Elena, Marcus said softly, taking her hand as they watched the garden bustle with activity around them. Do you ever regret it? Not taking the Seattle job, I mean. Sometimes I worry that you gave up too much for us. Elena considered his question seriously, as she always did when he asked about her choices. It was important to both of them that their decisions be real and honest, not based on romantic ideals or fear. I think about it sometimes, she said truthfully. I wonder what that life would have looked like. But I don't regret staying. This life, the one we're building together, feels more authentic to who I really am. Seattle would have been an escape. This is a choice. Marcus nodded, squeezing her hand. I love you for staying, but I also love that you could have left. That makes your choice to be here mean something. As the morning wound down and families began packing up their gardening supplies, Elena and Marcus helped the children water their plants one final time. Sophia, the little girl with the perfect tomato, ran up to Elena with a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the meadow section of the garden. These are for you, Miss Elena, she said shyly, because you taught us how to make the flowers grow. Elena accepted the bouquet with tears in her eyes, remembering the pressed flowers Marcus had sent her from Antarctica, the ones that still sat in their wooden box on her dresser. Some beautiful things did last, she thought, but they lasted because people chose to tend them, to water them, to give them space and light to grow. That evening, Elena and Marcus cooked dinner together in their small kitchen, the same one where they had shared their last meal before he left for Antarctica. But everything was different now. They moved around each other with the familiarity of people who had chosen each other consciously, who had tested their love against separation and crisis, and found it strong enough to build a life on. After dinner, they sat on their couch, Elena curled against Marcus's side as he read aloud from a book about sustainable agriculture that he was considering for his next community education program. Elena sketched in her art journal, working on ideas for the children's mural, occasionally looking up to watch Marcus's face as he read. This was what happiness looked like, Elena realized. Not the dramatic romance of novels or movies, but the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful with someone who understood both your dreams and your limitations. It was the choice to stay and tend the garden of their love, day after day, season after season, trusting that with enough care and attention, it would continue to bloom. As Marcus finished reading and set the book aside, Elena looked up from her sketching. What are you thinking about? She asked. Marcus smiled, the same gentle smile that had made her fall in love with him years ago in the coffee shop. I'm thinking about tomorrow, he said. About the science club meeting at the school, and whether Mrs. Patterson's tomatoes will be ready for the harvest festival, and what we should have for breakfast in the morning. I'm thinking about all the ordinary, beautiful moments we get to share. Elena closed her art journal and kissed him softly. I love our ordinary, beautiful moments, she said. Outside their window, the city settled into evening, full of other couples and families building their own ordinary, beautiful lives. And in their small apartment, surrounded by art supplies and science books and the remnants of a simple dinner shared together, Elena and Marcus continued writing their love story, not with grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but with the daily choice to see each other clearly, to grow together, and to tend the precious, fragile, enduring garden of their shared life. Their quiet goodbye had nearly become permanent, leaving everyone who loved them in tears. But they had found their way back to each other, not as the same people who had parted ways at the taxi stand, but as individuals who had learned that love was not just a feeling but a practice, not just a promise but a daily choice to build something beautiful together, one ordinary moment at a time.